Hello and welcome to an all-new episode of Anime Brain Freeze. We are your Kuso anime podcast hosts.
Je m'appelle Jean.
And I'm CC. And this is the show where we review all the anime series from the previous season we did and didn't watch start to finish.
Can you believe I actually didn't have to look that up? I knew that phrase off the top of my head.
Amazing. School
Also-
education was not completely lost on you.
Also, two things. I want to apologize for the episode preview at the end of our last one because I'm sure I butchered the phrase I was trying to say. And number two, we made it to 50 episodes.
Yeah, crazy. I mean, it's kind of a hallmark, but we're not going to do anything special for this one. Let's try to get this weird thing we created to 100, and then we'll see what we can do with that. I got some ideas, but I still have to talk with John about it. So, but yeah. Anyway, we're halfway there. Who thought we would even get this far? But it's about time we got to discuss pure, undistilled art on this show. And according to John, today we will do exactly that, because our first review will consist of him trying to talk about everyone's favorite meme and reference freak show Pop Team Epic. Then I'll unleash a gloriously feral Trash Bash Deluxe by reviewing the Furtastic Slaughterfest Killing Bites. And last but not least, both of us will discuss the time-stopping adventures of the Yukawa family in the series Kokkoku. So prepare yourself for a dazzling mishmash of Japanese cartoonery. We'll be right back.
Alright, so like we were saying, first up on the docket today is this little show about idols that came out of nowhere, you know, me and my idol shows, called Hoshihiro Girl Drop. So,
Everyone has heard of that, it's great.
Yeah. Hoshihiro Girl Drop is a series all about Daichi Taira and Sosugu Hoshifuri are as close as anyone could be as kids. Together they made a promise that when they got older, they would live together and get married. But Sosugu moved far away one day and he never saw her again. A couple of years later, Daichi is a regular teen living a humdrum life. Not even his parents leaving for an overseas trip can change that. And just before his parents get out the door, his mother gives him a bit of advice among the usual warnings. Take care of Sosugu. Unfortunately, he can't remember who or what Sosugu is, which is, pretty bad since she just moved into the house right within earshot of him saying that. But a lot of things have changed since their childhood, especially with Sosugu becoming the lead singer of the girl group sensation Drop Stars and gaining a whole new group of friends. Despite this, she is determined to make her remember that promise they made all those years ago, even if he has to get roped into her new career as her manager to do it. Along with the aloof and possessive Shinobu Tsukino and the older sister-like beauty Korona Yuhi, Daichi's life is about to take a whirl. Oh, wait. We're talking about a different show? What? This show isn't... This show isn't real? Wait. What notes did I write down? CC, did I do something wrong?
I'm not sure.
Oh. We're talking about Pop Team Epic, that meme show. Okay, all right. Bet you didn't see that coming.
What a shame.
I know. I wanted to talk about some idol anime today.
Because that rarely happens, It's one of your least used subject matters.
I know, right? And they're so few and far between, and
it would have been a nice change of pace.
I know, right? Well,
Oh well. I hope you got some, you got some spare notes for Pop Team Epic then.
So, Pop Team Epic is a show about these two girls, Popoku and Pipimi, and they are foul-mouthed and they're ready to take on every pop culture reference ever made. The show follows the pair through a series of surreal skits and short stories full of internet, movie, video game, and self-referential based comedy. I don't know how to review the show. So a lot of this is going to be me saying whatever comes to mind and actually referencing at several points this incredible Sakuga blog post with an interview with the series producer Kotaro Sudo, which I will provide you with the links. So when people, are able to listen to this podcast, will be able to read through the full interview themselves.
Yes, as usual, we always post links to interesting articles, both in YouTube comments, as normal episode comments. But of course, if you want to look stuff like that up, you can always go to our site, brainfreeze.com. They're all there, all of them, and this one will be too. So,
yeah. So this show, it's a little bit of everything as far as nerd culture goes, because it's goofy, it's off the walls, it is anything and everything you could possibly imagine. It was originally authored by a guy who goes by the name of Bukub Okawa, and he is a self-proclaimed Kuso manga boy, and he has in basically so many words referred to the original comic as just one giant shit post.
From what I've seen of it, which is not much, I have not witnessed a lot of Pop Team Epic either way, but from what I see, that is very fitting. Like, shit posting is what it is and what it was and what it kind of has become in anime form too.
Yeah, I mean, it starts off with the previously mentioned Hoshiro girl drop, and going into this show, I knew nothing about it, absolutely nothing. So imagine my surprise when they start off the first episode with this high school idol story and this almost this immaculately animated intro sequence that looks really good, by the way. And the facade is just torn away immediately as soon as the show starts.
Literally.
Yeah. Popco just literally tears through the title card and says, "I don't think so." And from there, it goes downhill or uphill.
Definitely sideways.
In the first 5 minutes of the first episode, they throw references like Chrono Trigger, Macross.
That was the only one I got.
Chrono Trigger, Macross, Guardians of the Galaxy, Your Name. Like, if you can think of it, it's fair play. It's fair play for this show in the comic, and it's chaos. Like I said in my very poor French last time around, just complete and utter chaos, which, like I said, makes it difficult to review because there's no straight through line with this show. You could basically start on any episode and probably be equally confused as if you started from the beginning.
Yeah, it's a from what I could garner from the first episode, because that's the only one I watched, it's just a sequence of non sequitur jokes and references that, I mean, if you know the series that they're making fun of, and or you were there when the original stuff happened on, I don't know, was shared on Twitter and other social networks, you probably get a lot more out of it. I assume.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably one of my criticisms of the show, is that, obviously for the international audience, not every single joke is not gonna land. And I don't know if that's a fair criticism to make, just because of who this is intended to be for. But
well, is it only for fans of the original webcomic?
I think there's an entry point for people who hadn't read the comics as well, just because, the comics are just the original comics are just, jokey 4-panel manga. It's really tough to say, anyone could enjoy this, because clearly that's not the case. I mean,
Yeah, I'm the best proof of that. Like,
you could get a cheap laugh out of some of the non sequiturs, but some of the more like real deep cuts are a bit more difficult to understand. Which and that's kind of why I watched the show on High Dive instead of Crunchyroll, because on High Dive, which by the way is Sentai Filmworks' streaming platform, they gave some context to some of the jokes and would put, like some footnotey stuff on there for some of the more out there stuff. Like there's one episode, it's like, oh, we're doing Char's Gelgoog dance, by the way, which is something that players in Gundam Versus do, where they like shuffle back and forth to avoid enemy fire. And it's like, oh, thank you, High Dive, for giving us the hot gameplay tips.
That sounds like, really nice for you to know what they're actually talking about, but once you have to explain a joke, it's rarely funny anymore. I mean, how do how do they circumvent that kind of trap? I mean, the show worked for you anyway.
I mean, because I got my cheap laughs out of a lot of the stupid visual gags they did too. I don't know whether or not to say this show is produced by the studio Doga Kobo, because there's so many different styles contained in this show that it'll give you whiplash from moment to moment. Like you'll have, the traditional hand animated, whatever. It looks normal-ish.
Yeah, but not not typical what you would consider typical anime art. It's very flat, cartoony, very like. Simple forms. Like, I mean, if you've seen the main characters of this show somewhere in some artwork, you know what the rest of the show looks like, or at least a part of the rest of the show, because that's not all it is. That's not all you're gonna see.
Yeah, we've got sections where you have dance numbers with felt puppets.
I didn't come that far.
You have sections that are done by a much smaller group called Akbu Acbu. If you're familiar with their name, you've probably seen a music video in your day on YouTube for a little song called Gallo Sengen.
Nope.
Okay, so maybe you haven't. I'll have to show you later so you can be amazed. And by amazed, I mean
horrified.
But this show is it is an anomaly. I feel like that is the single best word to describe it, because it I don't know why it exists. Mostly because hey, let me see here. Look at some of this interview. Kotaro Sudo, who was the series producer, as I stated previously, said, the person who interviewed at Sakuga blog says, I imagine you wouldn't be able to start the staffing process until after you've received the go-ahead from King Records. How did you get the green light to adapt Pop Team Epic into an anime? And he says in response, the first step is a planning meeting where the production people get together and discuss topics like whether they want to make an original anime or one based off an existing property. I brought the Pop Team Epic manga and tried to explain it, but it got rejected. They gave me looks that said, I don't know about this. I had a bunch of reasons I wanted to do it. For one, if you look at the industry, home video sales are on the decline. The business model is changing, and there are many possible avenues such as streaming and overseas expansion. And this is, this is something that, we don't really, it doesn't really seem to be said a lot as an aside, that, there is actual acknowledgement of the overseas audience.
Oh, yeah.
Which,
I'm part with the French in the first episode.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Pseudo goes on. That's where I came in with. I think the merchandise for this would sell like hotcakes. It'd definitely be best to get this on the market as a King Records IP. And
clever.
And there we go. He even said earlier, I'm the one you can blame for saying I want to turn this into an anime. So
at least he owns up to it. I mean,
yeah, he goes on to say that as far as being a producer, as far as directorial work goes, just because so much of this work was segmented across so many people making so many different styles for this show that a lot of that was just hands off. Like the Akbu segments I was mentioning earlier, apparently everything that made it to air was the first cut. There was no editing. That's just the rawest cut.
It sounds like this show and the creation of this show were kind of like this jazz jam session or something like that. Like,
yeah.
I mean, that's a cool concept. And if I can say anything about the show, which is not a lot, like I said, I've only seen the first episode, it felt fresh. It felt like this was a thing where, creativity in a way ran rampant, and this is what you get when that happens, or what you can get when that happens, and that's at least interesting. But the question is, how far can that interesting subject matter go when it comes to a comedy show, and how much broad appeal do you need to make this a success? I mean, the show was a success, if I'm not mistaken. Like, I heard pretty much only positive things about it.
I feel like the people who enjoyed it definitely enjoyed it for how weird and non-traditional it was. Like, 'cause, I mean, I was there for the stupid references, but I was also there to see how different it was compared to everything else you could possibly imagine as far as anime goes. Like, I don't want to say a lot of shows are formulaic, but this, if there were some last season that took the mold and shattered it into 1,000 pieces, well, this would be that show.
Yeah, definitely. You said the goofy situation of comedy is what kept you going, and what kept you sticking to the show, aside from that being different. And the anime references, I mean, how knowledgeable do you need to be about, anime in general to get, like, let's say 50% of the jokes? Because I watched, like, when I watched the first episode, I think I didn't even get any of the anime references. I got the Chrono Trigger joke, and
that one floored me.
Me too. Okay, that was a really good joke. But aside from that, a lot of the jokes just flew over my head and was just nonsense, partially funny nonsense, just because of the delivery, and because the way, how the first part of the show is voiced by weirdly off-putting male seiyus, and then the second part is voiced by actual female voice actresses, which is also a thing that is interesting, or was, an attraction probably for hardcore anime fans, because there was a different well-known voice actor doing a part in each of the episode. And it was like, who is this going to be this week? And who is it going to be this week? And it feels like they were getting in line to contribute to this project. And I assume that was what made a lot of people get invested and stick with it, just to get all the little bits and pieces and interesting little details that are hidden in there, and reference one of maybe your favorite shows or your favorite franchises and whatever. I don't know, how much did you get out of the show in that regard?
I mean, obviously there were some that were like, wait, hold on, who, what? Mm-hmm. But I mean, one of the ones that really floored me in the first episode was SPT Lasner, because there's some things in there where it was like, you think people would forget about some of these things, but obviously a lot of these references are stuff that Yukawa has some level of admiration for. Otherwise, why would he reference them? So I feel like that's got to be up to author preference as well. But yeah, going back to the point about the voice actors and actresses changing not once a week, but twice a week, that was like, oh, Jesus Christ. I don't even know where to start with that, because what they would do with every episode, these pairings were strategically picked. Because obviously, each pairing was, known for being together in some other show, some other game, some other what have you. Because you had one episode where you had Eriko Nakamura and Asami Imai, who are together in The Idolmaster. You had Rikia Koyama and Wataru Takagi, who are both known for having roles in Detective Conan. You had fucking Ryusei Nakao and Norio Wakamoto. If you know those names, you know they're Frieza and Cell from Dragon Ball. So every week it's a question of who's it going to be? What pairing are they going to choose? Is it going to be the pairing that I'm hoping for? Like, I had my fingers crossed for Solid Snake and Colonel Campbell. But unfortunately,
I don't even know they're Japanese voice actors.
Unfortunately, that didn't happen. But all of
maybe in the dub version, if there is one at some point.
There is a dub, but the pairings don't really match up in the same ways, which is I feel like it's a little bit of a missed opportunity, but I understand, that there's, going to be limitations on what they can do with that, because, you have some people who play the dub's handled by Funimation, and you have a lot of people who play a lot of different roles in one show alone on their crews. So, and they had to call in some outside help, I'm sure, just to make sure that they had 20, I don't know, how many would that be? Like 48 different voices across the show's runtime. I don't know how to recommend the show. I mean, obviously, if you're real deep into otaku culture and you recognize, not even otaku culture, there's Western references too. Like I said, in the first 5 minutes of the first episode, there's a Guardians of the Galaxy reference. So
I didn't recognize that one. So
when PPM busts Popco out of the chamber, like the logo font is very reminiscent of the Guardians logo font, as is the music when she's carrying Popco away is somewhat similar. But it's kind of there, but I feel like there's a little something for everyone in this show. For every weird, overly ridiculously Japanese joke in this show, there's something that you could look at and just be like, ha, I understood that reference.
Yeah, I mean, that it's hard to say why I didn't stick with the show. I think the first episode was just too weird for me, and I didn't get enough of the jokes, and I was like, I
get that.
I mean, I appreciate for it being different and everything, but I felt like there was not enough in there for me to, appreciate it enough and stick with it and make it fun. So I don't know how many people would end up on my side of things, because, like I said, I feel like the show was like not wholeheartedly, maybe, but the majority really liked the show for what it was and for its freshness and everything. And I think if our listeners out there who haven't checked out the show are interested in something, offbeat, an almost kind of Dadaistic sense of humor, and something, like we said, fresh and different, and maybe they should check it out. I know I asked you this before, but what is the thing that was I don't know, the thing you most appreciated about the show in every episode that you watched? Like, what was the thing that made you think, oh yeah, this was worth it was worth watching this episode?
I guess the best way to describe it is that it could be appreciated as sort of a anime version of a variety show. Because you never know what you're gonna get as far as the animation style, as far as the quote unquote story, because they do try to do some self-contained story bits in there, which is interesting.
Didn't expect that, actually.
Yeah, they do have some, because the sketches in this show can be as short as 10 seconds. They could be as long as 5 minutes. So it absolutely runs the gamut in terms of style, in terms of storytelling, in terms of production, voice acting. It's just it's hard to call this show anything other than completely unconventional, and it's great. That's what got the hooks in me, to see what kind of stupid horseshit they would bring to the table from week to week. And then, when the Kuso anime train pulled into the station that final Saturday, I was like, oh, there isn't going to be any more of this dumb horseshit to start my weekend anymore.
So have they said if they're going to do a second season?
They teased something at the end of the final episode, and it felt like one of those, I don't know if I trust you.
Especially with this show.
Because they teased it as, oh, the second season of Hoshiro Girl Drop is coming. I'm like, uh-huh. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it sounds like, I think it sounds like the best approach for this show is like to just, turn it on, let the chaos wash over you, pick up the references that you get and enjoy them, and, let's just let the rest be entertaining, maybe nonsense that you can't quite make sense of, but just appreciate for it being different. Would you say that's maybe the best way to consume this show?
Yeah, I think that's pretty much spot on. We mentioned at one point the French segments. Those were done by a guy at Dogakobo named Thibault Tresca, and he doesn't speak a word of Japanese. So he basically took these segments and made these like CG animated bits based off of the comics, putting in what he thought was going on.
Uh-huh.
And
it's probably wild.
And every time they have one of these, as they call them, Japon Mignon segments, they would bring him on camera to introduce the segment. And they actually went out and hired a couple of French language voice actresses to do the voices for those parts. It's like, Jesus Christ, the commitment to this level of ridiculous joke just is incredible. And I love when people just commit as hard as they can to the stupidest possible jokes, because that just puts a smile on my face. Like, yeah, you loved putting this together in spite of how dumb it was. Another bit that I want to talk about real briefly is that there were these interstitials in many of the episodes that were heavily referencing different video games, and they were done in like a pixel art style.
Nice. Those
were all done by a guy named Ryo Yamashita, who he had done previously this big like rhythm based, like this music based short that you can actually watch on YouTube called Dot Bit Beat. And it's real interesting. What's interesting about his contribution to Pop Team Epic the show is that this is his first time working in animation, and the work he did was contributing to his college thesis. When I read that, that's like, God, this is the first thing you do in the industry, and that's what it's going toward. That's incredible, man. I feel like for every instance of stupid nonsense that this show provided, there are an equal number of amazing behind-the-scenes stories that the cast and crew are going to have to tell about their experience with producing this show. And I feel like that's just that's something incredible. You don't really have a lot of shows that have these amazing stories behind them like that. And I think that alone is, makes it worth experiencing, because you can watch the show and be like, ha, I get that. And then, you can read about the production behind the scenes and be like, oh, wow, there's a lot more to this than you would think. And, you can obviously say that about any show, but I feel like just because of the style and the humor of this show, it makes it a bit more interesting to behold. And I feel like that's probably one of the things that gives this show the most merit, and it makes it worth checking out.
I love fighting games. I think we both do.
Yeah.
I mean,
to varying degrees.
yeah. And aside from Street Fighter, Tekken, and the other big names in that particular video game genre, I was always interested in the weird outliers as well. That's why I fell in love with a little series called Bloody Roar, developed by Hudson Soft and A-Ting, the latter also being responsible for some of the better Naruto fighting games, that just as an anime-related side note.
Oh yeah, they did the Clash of Ninja games, didn't they?
Yeah, exactly. Love those. Always appreciate them over the Ninja Storm games.
I mean, I think they both have their appeal, but go on.
Yeah, one is arena fighter, the other's more classic 1v1 fighter, and I always, leaning more towards the 1v1 fighter, even though it's not as flashy as the Ninja Storm games. Yeah, but in Bloody Roar, which got 4 mainline games and 1 semi-spin-off, you can take control of a plethora of fighters who are called zoanthropes, who can transform into a bunch of different were-beasts versions of your favorite animals. So you, of course, get a werewolf, a were-tiger, a were-gorilla, even a ninja were-mole. I adored those games, especially the GameCube version, Bloody Roar Primal Fury. That was lots of fun, and spent lots of hours on that game. Always a blast. The transformation aspect kept the gameplay varied and interesting, and I found a lot of the designs to be super cool back when I was a kid, and still. So, yeah, good stuff. But what was always weirded me out was that we never got an anime version of this, like in any form. Because the game's designs, artwork, and story were anime as fuck, in my opinion. Yeah, Primal Fury got an anime OP and some anime endings, and an actual manga featuring a character called Fang, who actually made it into the Japanese version of the game. But we never got an anime series or OVA or movie for this franchise, which I felt was a missed opportunity for a, great trashy monster action fest. Until now!
Oh, no.
Because Killing Bites is probably as close as you can get to that premise. The zoanthropes are called therianthropes here, or brutes if they are, actual fighters. But aside from that, it's pretty close to what you would expect. The story setup is simple but effective. There is an underground fighting league called Killing Bites that is sponsored by the 4 biggest conglomerates of Japan. One of the hot newcomers in Killing Bites is Hitomi Uzaki, going by the alias Ratel. So she's basically a vicious were-honey badger. And as we all know, honey badgers don't give no fucks and ain't afraid of nothing. So if you've looked up some honey badger vids on YouTube for some reason ever, you're probably aware that they are some of the fiercest and most fearless animals out there. So since this show styles the character behavior of the protagonists after their animal counterparts, Hitomi is exactly that. She loves to fight, she loves sweet things, and she will kick your ass if you get in her way. Her favorite phrase is, "The one with the sharpest fangs always wins." That's Killing Bites. And get ready to hear that a lot, because she says it at least once in every fucking episode.
God.
Yeah, so if that shit annoys you, you're in for a ride. Yeah, so the show starts off with her fighting one of the big stars of the Killing Bites scene, Lion, and making a name for herself by downright destroying him. Our other kind of main protagonist is a poor schmuck called Yuya Nomoto, who is a college student who gets roped in by some asshole acquaintances of his to be their driver to help them pick up girls. What Yuya doesn't know is that their plan for picking up girls is abducting and raping them in the back of the van that he is driving. What those scumbags don't know is that the girl they pick up is Hitomi, who promptly cuts them to pieces, rightfully so.
God damn.
Yeah.
God damn.
The show doesn't waste any time to show you what it's about. So she only lets Yuya live so he can drive her to the place where her match against Lion is supposed to take place. And from that moment on, he is basically stuck with her. Like, she moves into his apartment and everything and has to basically do her every bidding, because otherwise she is threatening to waste him as well. Even though he, didn't really have a part in the whole thing, because he wanted to get out the moment he realized what was going on, but, didn't have the time. But whatever. So they're stuck with each other, basically. Of course, they develop a growing level of trust, and their relationship becomes an integral part in the later, parts of the series. Yeah, so that is not just, something that happens, but it has actually some meaning. And for all intents and purposes, those are our two main protagonists. We get some more later on because Hitomi has to build a team with some other characters. We get this like brutish, but nice guy who is like a hippo when he transforms. And one of the other characters that is part of their team later on is Ui Inaba, who is, her persona basically is rabbit. So she's not really a good fighter because her main instinct is to run away from everything and, dig a hole and hide in it. But she makes for a lot of great comedy bits because of that. And actually later in the fight, she gets a lot more useful than I expected her to be. So yeah, surprise is, the show surprised me many times, which in itself I didn't expect. So, but we get to that. Before we dig deeper into that, though, let's quickly talk about who's responsible for this trash fest of a show. The original manga was created by two people. Kasasa Sumita illustrated it. He also did the art for a Witchblade manga. And the story was written by Shinya Murata, who has a rather interesting vita. He also wrote the manga Jackals and Arachnid, but he did a few different things in anime as well. Color management on a lot of the Pokemon movies and Summer Wars, for example, and key animation on Guns, Gungrave, and he apparently was involved with the planning for Working Season 2. Weird mix of things here. The anime was produced by Leiden Films, who have a spotty track record and who I've probably brought up before when raging about both seasons of Berserk, since they are partially responsible for that, at least production-wise. The actual animation, if you want to call it that, was done by a different studio. But yeah, they did the animation production for this and for other shows like Heroic Legend of Arslan, which was fine, but very uneven in terms of quality. They also worked on the new Initial D movies, Miss Monochrome, and did a lot of in-between animation for a lot of different stuff. The animation in Killing Bites is not of high quality. There are a lot of shortcuts, some off-model characters, some weird janky or limited movement in certain scenes, which is what I expected when I read that Leiden Films was responsible for this. But thankfully, the direction in the series, especially the action direction, is pretty damn strong most of the time. The hits have a lot of impact, you get a lot of cool camera perspectives that highlight the brutal attacks and imposing nature of the animal versions of the characters. Yes, the heads of some of the brutes are ridiculously huge for some reason, especially lions. It's like his head is almost as big as the rest of his body for some reason. At least in the beginning. But aside from that, most of what needs to look cool in the show does look cool. The sound work is also really great, giving us like these meaty, impactful sound effects for all the vicious hits and blood splattering and dismemberment in the show. I really liked how effective the show was at bringing across the forcefulness of the fights on display here. The director of the show is Yasuto Nishikata, and he has been an episode director on stuff like Arslan, Bleach, Drifters, Samurai Flamenco, and Sword Art Online Season 2. And I think considering the probably rather limited budget Killing Bites had, he did some good work here. And of course the rest of the stuff. Also deserving a highlight here is the music, because it's the kind of trashy rock metal mix that fits the theme of this material really well. The composer is Yasuharu Takanashi, who is probably most well known for doing the music in Naruto Shippuden, but he also did a lot of stuff for the Pretty Cure franchise, for Sailor Moon Crystal, Fairy Tail, and another trash fighting anime, Ikitosen. That's a blast from the past. Every time I think I've forgotten about it, someone has to remind me, and it's pulling you back in.
I'm just like, oh no. I think I watched maybe a grand total of 3 episodes of that show.
I watched the first season of that. I'm not a fan of it, but it bears a striking resemblance in certain aspects to my trash anime pick du jour. But yeah, great rock metal thing that highlights all the mayhem going on in the fights, and there's some really cool tracks that play when our heroes get their moments of glory, and yeah, I really like the music in that show. It fits really well. Now, one thing to note is that Bloody Roar, at least from what I remember from the story, that bit of story that it had, always seemed to take itself rather seriously, which is weird considering the subject matter. But that's what it did. It's like this weird dark tone to it. Killing Bites does not. At all. The show is super self-aware and pokes fun at itself on a regular basis in many different ways. Be it in a way the characters behave because of their animal personas, and they have these like weird quirks and way they act and talk. The crazy announcer in the tournament, that lady really gets into the fight. And she has a different role to play too, and that's great. But yeah, she really, really loves to scream about the newest events in the battle. And I don't remember who her voice actress is, but she does a really good job on getting you hyped up as well for what happens in any given episode of that show. And there are also like these weird. One of my favorite fun aspects in the show are these weird bits of animal facts sprinkled in between by the over-enthusiastic narrator, who is also fantastic. Every time a new character, a new animal character, a new brute, a new therianthrope appears and does some fighting move, you get like these intercuts of still frames with weirdly realistic drawings of the actual animals, and then there's like this JoJo's Bizarre Adventure-esque narrator, like overly dramatic, talking about what that animal does and why that character does the same thing basically now. And it's like, yeah. The tiger is the mightiest animal in the anime kingdom besides the lion, and he has the sharpest fangs and the highest speed. And can you believe this shit? Get hyped! And it's amazing.
One of those typical cutting in, like, allow me to explain.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, pretty much. It's fantastic, and it always gave me a laugh. He's so into it, and it's great, and it gets you into it too. And there, another thing, and it's what you shouldn't miss. You should watch the episode, or at least skip the credits and then watch the fun after credits skits that are in every episode, because they feature a friend of Hitomi who never appears in the actual show, but it's like, supposed to have like this weird honey guide persona, which is apparently in nature has like this symbiotic relationship with the honey badger. But they always make really fun of that because she's not an actual therianthrope, which is, that sentence that gets repeated by the narrator every time in more ecstatic fashion at the end of those skits for some reason. That also gave me a huge laugh in certain parts, in certain episodes, especially in the last one. But yeah, little things like that show you that the creators of this show knew exactly what this is and what they had and what they made. Pretty much like, with Pop Team Epic, like you mentioned before, this feels like, yes, we know this is dumb, but we love this shit and we're gonna have fun with it. And, by way of this, you're maybe gonna have fun with this too. Because you can feel that they were really having fun with this material, and that, I don't know, this is infectious in a way. It worked on me. And it's important because otherwise this wouldn't have worked at all. The premise is ridiculous. The fights are insanely over the top and incredibly violent. The fan service quota is through the roof. It's like the trashiest of trashy things, and it knows it, and that makes it super fun. Now, I was actually surprised several times during the show due to how the story progressed. First, because the OP makes you believe that this will be mainly a classic 1-versus-1 cage match tournament thing. But after a few episodes, Hitomi gets recruited by one of the conglomerates, or Zaibatsus, to fight for them in the deathmatch Battle Royale. Hey, there it is again, Battle Royale. The topic of this year, I guess.
Man, I can't wait when we're done recording to fire up my Xbox One and play Fortnite.
Yay!
If only that were an ad placement.
Yeah. Nope. But so she gets recruited and is gonna take part in this deathmatch battle royale, where groups of 3 brutes representing one of the Zaibatsus are dropped on an island and have to duke it out until only one group or one fighter is left standing. That part of the story takes up most of this season's runtime, and a member of each Zaibatsu controls one of the 3 fighters entering for their company, moving them around like chess pieces on the battlefield. So Yuya hesitantly becomes the handler of Hitomi, and I really like what they did with that dynamic, because I expected him in the beginning to be like this throwaway everyman joke character who is only there to be like the straight man to Hitomi, and you know, not knowing what's really going on. But the way they integrated him into that arc worked really well, in my opinion. It made things more interesting, made him more sympathetic as a character, and he's like this fish out of water who has no idea what is going on. He's thrown into this shit and has to he's responsible for Hitomi's life, because he has to steer her away from danger and decide when it's her best time for her to fight and who to fight. And in the beginning he really has no idea what to do, and all the other members of the Zaibatsu of course make fun of him, one in particular, and she's an asshole, and but it's really fun to see him during the course of that arc come into his own and become, an actual more confident and interesting character. And I didn't expect that, especially not from this kind of show. And I really appreciated it. I thought that was cool. Naturally, the main focus is on the fights themselves, and there's much blood and destruction in those as I could hope for. The fights were really fun to watch, and I was never bored due to all the different animal types and their special attacks and abilities, and of course all the random animal facts for each of them yelled out by the amazing narrator. Now, if you're squeamish about people getting torn apart and cut to pieces, don't watch this show. Like, please, not at all. It doesn't hold back. I was sometimes really surprised at the level of violence that was going on in the show. Also, like I said before, there's a lot of fan service. Of course, most of our female characters don't fully transform into their animal personas, just so that there is enough skin left to throw lots of tits and ass at the viewer. There's also 1 or 2 pretty off-putting sexually themed scenes during the course of the show. One, to be fair, ends on a kind of funny or at least satisfying note in terms of comeuppance. But the other one, which happened in the final episode, was kind of unnecessary and ruined the fun a bit. I didn't like that one, even though the person that it happens to is a shitty person. But still, it felt icky. But aside from that, I had a blast with this series. It's dumb, it's loud, it's violent, extremely bloody, but always fun. It's definitely my kind of trash. The story even goes some places I didn't expect, like giving Hitomi a pretty decent and interesting background story, and also dishing out one of its most what the fuck moments at the end of its final episode, which leads directly into the teaser for a second season, which I hope we'll get. The manga is still running, so there's probably enough material. And yeah, they're setting up a second season pretty heavily at the end of the final episode. So we'll see where that goes. I'm really looking forward to that if that happens. Lots of potential for sequel things here. But yeah, if I never get a Bloody War anime, maybe rather I want an actual fighting game of this made out of this show, an actual Killing Bites fighting game. To fulfill my fighting game and anime fighting game anime needs. But yeah, if you are a fan of super trashy action anime, I gotta say it doesn't get much trashier than this one. And as a plus, parts of it felt surprisingly self-aware, engaging, and well made. So, thumbs up. If that kind of dumb shit is your thing at least once in a while, I'd say you can sink your teeth into Killing Bites without regrets.
Last up today is a show that I hope you made some time for. They can't all be winners. I'm sorry. But
Pop Team Epic exhausted your joke quota for this week.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I had to maintain the spirit of Pop Team, but here we are. The last show we're going to talk about is Kokkoku, sometimes also called Moment to Moment. The show is about this girl, Juri Yukawa, and she has failed 19 job interviews in one day. First off, I want to know how she made it to 19 interviews in one day. That seems implausible, but I guess we're going to push that aside.
Yeah.
She dreams of moving out of her parents' home, and her dreams are basically utterly dashed. She's stuck living with her working mother, Nobuko, her neat brother, Tsubasa, her laid-off father, Takafumi, and her sister, Sanae, who's a single parent. And the only hope for this family, you know, is her son to become a decent adult, her little nephew, Makoto. And, you know, however, this struggling family's life takes a turn for the worse when Makoto and Tsubasa are violently kidnapped by a mysterious organization and held for ransom. With only 30 minutes to deliver a 5 million yen ransom to the criminals, Juri's grandfather reveals a dangerously powerful secret to her and her father. By offering blood to her grandfather's mystical stone, the three enter the world of stasis, a version of the world where time stops for everyone but them. Having arrived at their destination, the rescue efforts go awry when they are assailed by a surprising group of people who are somehow able to move around within stasis as well. While all hope seems lost, a monstrous giant known only as the Herald appears amidst the chaos, its intent and motivations as cryptic as the very nature of this timeless world. So, this is the first TV series worked on by a studio called Geno Studio, who had splintered off from Manglobe before they shut down. Geno Studio, their namesake, comes from their first work, a movie called Genocidal Organ. And they are also working on the currently airing Golden Kamuy and some upcoming series called just Pet.
That I didn't know that. That explains Golden Kamuy's looks, or how it looks. Because the same complaints I have about Kokkoku's visuals, I have about Golden Kamuy's as well. So, yeah, I guess that's on the studio then.
Yeah, about that.
Yeah, lots of, just to, you know, immediately interrupt your staff call out, but one of the to be criticized things about this shows are the visuals in some parts. And I mean, the show doesn't look bad, I think. Just, you know, in general, I think the backgrounds are rather nice. I think some of the character designs and models are pretty cool. But there are like a lot of off-model character moments and
oh yes,
and yeah, very noticeable, some very limited and stiff movement sometimes. It feels like just from a budget standpoint, this feels like a very, very cheap show at times. And yeah, that was weird. Like, at the beginning, it looked really solid, but the longer it progressed, I felt the more these scenes kept popping up. I wonder if they were running out of money or didn't plan very well. Yeah, it was weird and very noticeable at the end. I don't know, how much did you get bothered by that?
Yeah, I mean, there were some moments more so than others where it was like, oh, it looks like the teams that were working on this show were not communicating, because I don't think it's all bad. I mean, I feel like there are worse looking shows.
Yeah,
but
definitely.
This, it's rough. It is rough.
And it's not like there are that many action scenes in the show that you would, you know, say, oh man, this is taking out all of the excitement of the action scenes. No, that not really. Like, But, even in the moments where not that much happens, especially then the off-model characters, when they're talking and everything, are much more noticeable. So it's like, maybe you should have worked a bit longer in this, guys, if you could.
I feel like I can draw parallels between this and 91 Days, because 91 Days, it was a really good show with an interesting story and characters, but man, the production was lackluster on that show.
Yeah, there was, some weird inconsistencies with the clothing and everything, and we talked about that in our reviews of 91 Days. But I never felt that the artwork and the actual animation, took a giant nosedive. And I mean, it didn't either in Kokkoku, but it felt like it was slowly degrading, and that was not something that I got from 91 Days. There were bits and pieces where I said like, ugh, okay, this is weird. Maybe this needed a bit more work. But, the farther Kokkoku progressed, like, the more I don't know if it was the last episode or the one before that. I think it got a bit better in the last episode, but the one before that was, like, really only those scenes and only the characters looking weird all the time. It was like, how did we get this far?
Yeah.
And I got that from the second episode, which I'm sad to say, of Golden Kamuy as well. It was like, after the first episode, even with the shitty CG, I was still pretty hyped for that show. And then the second episode was like, really, this looks all really stilted and weird and jaggy and bad and off model. Oh, I hope it doesn't stay this way. And considering that it's the same studio working on this, that doesn't really give me much hope. I mean, maybe Golden Kamuy has a bigger budget and it will get better again. But yeah, this is definitely one of the downsides on both those shows.
I feel like Golden Kamuy, it seems like it was made a bigger deal of than Kokkoku.
Yeah,
so
definitely. Yes,
I'm hoping
it's one of the high-profile shows of this season.
Yeah, I'm hoping that because of the branding and the name and the recognition, that as time goes on, it'll get better.
Yeah, maybe. We'll see. Maybe they'll get better in terms of resource management, or get more help. I don't know. We'll see. But yeah, back to the staff. Sorry.
No problem. The original creator of Kokkoku is Seita Horio, whose other credits include a manga called Golden Gold. Good name.
Okay.
That I don't know much about. I gotta be honest, I didn't really look into it, but good name. Like I said. The director is Yoshimitsu Ohashi, who's worked on stuff like Amnesia, Aquarian Age, Galaxy Angel, Sacred 7, and Witchblade. Bring that up.
Oh boy.
And a lot of the scripting and composition was worked on by Noboru Kimura, who's worked on various number of things like Amagami, Dragonar Academy. Oh, boy. God, I remember trying to watch that show, and I think I got 3 episodes in, and I was like,
Well.
Fantasista Doll, which I remember hearing the name of and not really checking out. You worked on Nyarko, though. More stupid reference humor in this podcast.
Can't get enough of that.
And did works on other stuff like Excel World, the currently airing Gundam Build Divers, the Gundam Age movie Memory of Eden, My Hime, another piece of weirdness. Man, that show got strange. And we're going to reference Working again. Yay, Working! And the music was done by Michiru, who doesn't have a lot of credits to her name, but has worked on stuff that we've watched, like Adam the Beginning and Iseto the Last Witch. So there's a little bit of recognition for ourselves there, at least.
And the music was solid. It was not like standing out that much, more in the background. I don't remember any memorable themes in this show, to be honest.
I think that's because a lot of, this is as you said, is not an action anime, but
Yeah.
it is predicated on being very tense. And I feel like, as far as hitting on that theme, the show definitely did that very well, for the most part. I have my opinions about the final episode. I thought it was a little weird, but,
Yeah, we'll talk about that.
The show, it had an interesting setup because, I mean, when I introduced it at the end of the last episode, all I could think of from the beginning to the end was Zawaruto and how long can you move in the frozen time? And
Turns out pretty much forever.
and not everything has to be a JoJo reference, but let's be real.
Yeah. That's the first I was thinking of too. So, I mean, there's more to this show though. It's not just a time-stopping gimmick. That's the setup, and it's an interesting setup. It's like, what would happen if you're stuck in time, and there are other people who are stuck in time too, and who are after you, and how can you use that environment and other powers, to fend them off? And that's a neat. It's a neat self-contained. In general, this is a very small scale story and a very small scale setting. It's only like the small part of one small Japanese town, and or at least that's what I think it is. And it's only about. Well, I say only about this family, but considering that, a lot of anime are only about maybe one or two main characters, this is a rather large cast, actually, not even counting all the members of the, the cult who are after the powers of the family. But I think, speaking of the family, this is pretty much, in my opinion, the best part of Kokkoku is the family and their dynamics. Because it's the family is very relatable. All the family members are super sympathetic, at least in some regard. Let's say at least relatable. I liked all the scenes where the family members acted like an actual family. Like they bickered with each other. They sussed out the differences, and that makes the whole show feel very real, which is very important. Since, there's a lot of crazy stuff and weird stuff happening around them with all the fantasy and sci-fi shit. So, I really liked all, the family stuff in this show. The relationship between Juri and her grandfather probably being my favorite because it's the heart of the show and the emotional glue that holds this patchwork mix of kind of shaky story beats and uneven pacing together. It's like those two, and you can really, especially like in the last two episodes, but even before that, you can really feel that those two have a very grounded and important relationship, that they deeply care for each other, that they're really important to each other. And she likes her grandfather more than even her own father, understandably so, because Takafumi is an idiot.
He's a shithead.
Yeah, he's a shithead. Did we ever get the grandfather's name, actually? I think he's only called Grandpa.
No, and I looked it up a few minutes ago to confirm that he's just Ji-san, just Grandpa.
Yeah. So but Juri's and Grandpa's relationship is great, and, their interaction is fantastic. And it's just like, it's this great, they're this great power team too, because, it turns out, I mean, it's a bit of a spoiler, but not much because it's already established, like in the first 3 episodes, I think. It turns out Juri has the power to expel people from stasis by touching them, which we later learn why that is the case. And I thought that was also pretty interesting how they set that up. And her grandfather has the power to teleport, to jump small distances. Not perfectly, not at all. Basically, he never really ends up where he wants to go because he doesn't have it perfectly under control. None of them do. But it's great how those two work together and how that is incorporated into the few confrontations in that show, and how those two need to learn how to, make the best out of their weird powers. And that's the stuff I liked about the show. Like all the, different family members. I liked her. I liked her brother, the need of the family. Even though I felt like he, among many other, some other characters, got the short stick when it came to, screen time. Tsubasa is not that much in the show. We never get to meet Makoto's mom.
Yeah.
We barely met Juri's mom. Like, it feels like, okay, this is not the whole family. And if they, if we had all the members, maybe we would get some more interesting dynamics and little stories to tell. So it feels like they should have, spent even more time on the family dynamics instead of giving us all the exposition in the show. And there's a lot of exposition in the show. Like, holy shit. Oh, this is, at sometimes, like, this is really excruciating. Like, the story overall just already moves pretty slow at times. And there's not enough interesting stuff happening at certain moments in the show. But then you pair that with this exposition that talks in excruciating detail about the nature of the stasis world and its mechanics, which, are interesting, but I felt that they spent way too much time on that and should have used a lot more show instead of tell, because this really reduces the pacing to a sluggish molasses at certain parts in the show. I don't know how you felt about this.
Yeah, I mean, I agree that, it definitely did get a little too talky at points, several points. Oops. But I don't know how they would have, adequately shown. No, I guess they could have shown what the heralds were, but it still had some merit in explaining a little bit of what they were.
I mean, it's important to parts of the story, especially considering one of the side characters and her story and how that gets resolved and everything. That's important. But didn't have to spend that much time on it. Like, keep that to a bare minimum, guys. It would have worked nonetheless, because it's not that complicated. It feels like the show was making more out of its premise and the stuff that happens in its world, like, was trying to make it sound more difficult to understand than it actually was. And thus, when they explain it, all of that shit, it feels like it doesn't really amount to that much, in the big grand scheme of things and everything. So yeah, it's like I said, there's some slow moments in the show, and even if there does something does happen, it doesn't necessarily feel like a lot was achieved, or as if that specific scene was an important moment in that story. Honestly, the most interesting and emotionally engaging stuff happens in its first two and maybe the last episode. Everything in between, with a few exceptions like the resolution of Shoko's story, like I said before, can feel a bit too low-key at times, considering the stakes and subject matter. Like, what's at stake here, at least for the family members. Sometimes it felt like, yeah, this should have been more. This should have had more impact. This should have felt like it mattered more, and I had it very rarely in this show, and that's a problem. And I wonder if that's a flaw of direction or just a flaw of the story. I don't know how fast the story progresses in the manga. If they, just stretched it out. But that was a problem I had with the show was the pacing and sometimes anticlimactic feeling of the events that occurred in the show. Like I said, some of the characters, family is still the best thing about this, but some of the characters get the short stick. Like I said, Tsubasa and both moms in this in this family. Yeah, don't do much with Tsubasa after the first couple of episodes. Takafumi, like we said, is this giant shitbag. Doesn't really get any comeuppance for his bullshit behavior, which is also a bit disappointing. I mean, there's a small bit at the end, but that isn't really. That's when he is actually trying to do something good. So, I don't know, that didn't fit really well. Every time he pulls something shitty, that doesn't really result in him, getting, I don't know, much more than scolded. So, yeah, I mean, that also kind of fits, since you tend to always have some member of a real family who is completely resistant against learning from their mistakes. But it's still it doesn't feel really satisfying in the grand, in the story itself. I don't know how you felt about that.
I wonder if a lot of these things that weren't really expounded upon, like, Tsubasa, like the Juri's sister and her mother, were going into greater detail in the manga.
Yeah, I wonder how much they cut out, and if they thought they had to concentrate more on the main story, on the villain and what his motivation is and everything, which in a lot of other shows is a good idea, maybe, streamline things, cut some of the unnecessarily fat out. But in this show, where the most interesting things are the character interactions, because our main couple of protagonists, you maybe cut off some of the other stuff off, because the villain in the show, he's okay, but he's kind of boring. Like, his motivation isn't like super cliche take over the world stuff, which I appreciated, but it kind of boils down to something evenly unremarkable.
Kinda?
Yeah.
Kinda?
Yeah. Like, it's okay. I get his motivation in a way, or I get the appeal of that, and that's something that is not used that much as villains in anime, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I also get his motivations, but I also don't understand why he felt like he needed to fight. And they address that. They do address that.
Exactly. I thought that was good. I was like, yeah, this is why, you could have just asked.
Yeah, basically.
That's what I do. And if your villain is completely dismantled by that sentence and by that sentiment, if you had just asked, they would have probably helped you.
Yeah.
So that's not good. That's weak stuff, guys. And his background story also kind of sucks. Like they just rattle that off in basically half of an episode, and I thought it would amount to something, but in the end it felt like, okay, this is it. And then the final confrontation with him is interesting from a setup, but also kind of a weird anticlimax. Like the way that wrapped up was just, okay, this is what we do now, and is this over now? Is that how it ends? Because I didn't see that coming. Also, yeah, kind of a weird send-off for that character, considering how he was built up, and especially in the starting with the last third of that show, he's really, really built up this serious menace, serious powerful menace, and gets a set of abilities and everything. It's like, oh shit, how are they gonna beat them? What the hell? This is impossible. He's kind of a demigod now, and
then they just sort of do it, and it's like, oh, all
yeah,
right.
Exactly, with not much effort, really, not at all. The threat level, suddenly you think it's high, and then it gets completely diffused, and you're like, okay, that happened. That's weird. Yeah, the ramifications of this, the conclusion to this, hold some potential for possible future seasons, but we probably won't get those. The manga is finished. I don't know how much material the anime covers, but I assume it's all of it. And just from a story perspective, this doesn't need a sequel.
No.
It's really... It feels really self-contained. It feels like a closed-off story, which I appreciate. I thought, okay, this is neat. 12 episodes?
Mm-hmm.
12 episodes. Neat 12-episode small thing, and that's okay. But, just, the whole thing, how it concluded, it felt like they were setting up more and maybe, new characters introduced, and you're like, okay, maybe this will lead to something, and then the show is over, and you're like, okay, this could lead to something, but I don't think so, because the rest of the story feels like, okay, this was the story of this family in this weird conflict, and now that is done, and I don't think it's gonna go anywhere else. So yeah, this show is weird. How the story progresses, how it is, where it decides to put its, its accentuated moments. I don't know if the manga. I guess I wanna look up if the manga is structured in the same weird way or if there's something more that makes it work, that makes it hold together more. I don't know. What was the thing that you appreciated most about the show, to get a bit more positive again? Because I already talked about what I like most about the show.
I like the whole, how are they going to resolve this within, the stopped time? What's going to happen? It at least kept me hanging on from episode to episode, from moment to moment, if you will.
Yeah. Great. Fantastic.
But no, in spite of the pacing and a lot of the leftover questions that I still have, it kept me going each week, and I thought it was interesting for what it was.
Yeah, the problem is probably it's just you look at those setups, you look at those details, and you look at all the characters, and what you take away from that show after finishing is like, this was all right.
Yeah.
But it could have been a lot better. With that setup, with those character constellations, with everything. This could have been a much better, much more interesting show, much more engaging show, much more emotional show. There was so much potential here, and I think that's what I like most about the show. And, when I talked about it could maybe being the sleeper hit of the season, which of course now I don't think so.
Yeah,
but,
I agree.
In the sneak peek, I like parts of it a lot. I like the character dynamics, especially Juri and her grandfather. I liked some of the world building. I liked Shoko. I liked Sako, that weird, kind of Yakuza-ish guy who surprised me, who I had pegged as this like kind of typical henchgoon guy, and who became something else, and his relations to Shoko and everything. I thought that was pretty cool. I liked, like I said, I liked some of the world building. I liked the inherent weirdness of the premise and, the world that they were inhabiting. I actually even liked the conclusion, even if that was weird too. I liked the final episode. I think you want to talk about how you maybe didn't. But I think I liked the show more for its potential than for what it actually turned out to be, because I very rarely felt like I was emotionally engaged in this show, even with the strong character relationships. And like I said, the only moments that I was really into what was happening and was really emotionally engaged was when there was a strong moment between Juri and her grandfather, because in my opinion were like the only emotionally rewarding scenes in that show. And maybe, like I said, the resolution to Shoko's arc. Mm-hmm. But yeah, what did you want to say about the final episode that was off-putting to you?
I guess thinking about it and how they kind of foreshadowed part of it from like the very onset.
Yeah, that's true.
But
I always thought like, wait, are they gonna go back to that, because that character hasn't appeared yet? And okay.
But they didn't do a good job with that, because then you get to the final moments of the show and it's like, oh, okay, this seems like some lore that should have come up along the way, and it didn't, and I'm doing my best to try and talk around it.
Yeah. It also seems it seems like a giant cop out to give you a happy ending to the show, which is also a spoiler that you get one. I
feel like a good choice.
I never doubted we would get one, but just in terms of how they make that happen, it feels like, this is kind of a Deus Ex Machina thing.
Mm-hmm.
Which is not a random occurrence in the show, because at one moment I was literally writing down in my show notes Deus Ex Makoto, because for some reason, something happens in that show that is not foreshadowed at all, I think. And then suddenly, yeah, that gets them out of a tight place because that happens. I'm like, what? Okay. That came out of nowhere. And yeah, that happens in the final episode too. You're right. So.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't dislike this show.
Me neither.
I think it's just fine.
Yeah.
And I think that's my problem with it is that, and you touched on the story, there's a lot of wasted potential. It could be more than just fine. It could be good. It could be great. But it just sort of settled itself on being, this is an okay show sort of deal.
Yeah, it's all right. It's like, it's good that it's as short as it is. If, with that much or few content that is in there, if that ran for 26 episodes, I would probably a lot more unhappy about it. But, with 12 episodes, it feels like, okay, this was like short thing, somewhat underwhelming in certain parts, but not, not a bad watch inherently. And it's just like you said, this could have been more, and that's what leaves you a bit disappointed. Not angry, not saying, this was a bad show, not, hating it or anything, just saying, I see where this could have gone and what this could have done if it was in the right hands, if it, what maybe had a better source material. I don't want to harp on the manga because I know maybe it is better because this was a mishandled adaptation. I can't say, but this is much better in terms of potential than what it actually amounts to in the end. And it is really that's kind of sad because we both expected more from this, just on the merits of the first few episodes alone. But we didn't get that. So yeah, quickly before we wrap this up, I still want to mention one positive thing again about the family dynamic. I earlier said that Takafumi is not learning from his mistakes, and speaking of that, I love that the family in general is always portrayed as a bunch of amateurs who are improvising a lot because they don't really know what they're doing, because they're normal people and not, cardboard coon anime heroes. There is this great scene where they're running up a bunch of stairs to save someone, and then one of them is like, wait, what are we doing? We can teleport up there. that made, for some reason, that made me really laugh because it felt pretty real. It's like in such a heightened situation. Yeah, I wouldn't think about that either. The first instinct would be, let's run up the stairs, and then wait.
Hold on,
our grandfather has fucking teleport ability.
It's great. It's like, hold on. What are we doing?
What are we doing? There was just like this weird, quirky little funny moment in this kind of dramatic scene. I was like, yeah, that's good stuff. That great. If the show had more of that, that would also been fantastic. And the show does have some of that, but not enough. And, instead decides to spend too much time on the villain, on the villains in general. Like, there are too many characters in that cult society that don't matter and are not interesting, and we see too much of them. And they're not even threatening. In the beginning they are, but then, Juri gets her powers and they don't really matter anymore at all. And it's weird. It feels down to earth in an interesting way, especially considering the weird sci-fi fantasy premise, but in some places it doesn't work, and it needed a bit more heart, I guess, in certain parts, and a bit more substance, and it didn't have that. So if you are in the mood for a kind of neat little sci-fi fantasy story with an interesting story setup and a bunch of relatable characters, maybe give it a go. But don't expect any high highs or low lows. A lot of the show felt kind of just there and a bit flat, maybe. And that is a wrap on the 50th episode of Anime Brain Freeze. All the music in our show is from the Double Dragon Neon soundtrack by the amazing Jake Kaufman, Please go to vrt.bandcamp.com and check out his awesome work. Our show is available on most of the popular podcast services, but it's always worth visiting animebrainfreeze.com for some interesting articles linked in our episode release posts. Follow us on Twitter at AnyBrainFreeze. We tweet regular updates and fun anime-related stuff there. Leave us comments and questions on Facebook and our YouTube channel, or send an email to animebrainfreeze@gmail.com. We would love to read your feedback. Thanks for tuning in. We hope you had a good time, and please join us again on our next show. Macht's gut.
Au revoir. Next time on Anime Brain Freeze.
A devil may actually cry.
A journey of self-discovery and finding friendship in the frozen wastes.
And we bear witness to a kick-ass battle between modern knights and otherworldly horrors.